Hey kiddos, welcome back to Tantric Tuesdays. So today we're going to go over the book Come As You Are by Emily Nagaski. This is actually the workbook, the companion workbook to the book. I tooled through her book on Audible. It was such a delight when the author narrates the book and it just comes through her passion, excitement, and so that was a delight. But I happened to be randomly vacationing in Portland a couple of weeks ago and looked up sex positive shops and found one that is owned by women, run by women, called Shebop, S-H-E-B-O-P. If you're in Portland, go to that shop. Great. And while I was in there perusing the shop, I came across her workbook, the companion book to her book. And I don't normally do workbooks, but I thought, what the hell? And it's been a phenomenal extra resource to the book in that it takes ideas and concepts at the level of the mind and really puts them into practice. And I've done some of these exercises for myself and with a partner, and it's really unpacked some things. I'll talk about that in just a second. So I highly recommend the workbook to the book to make these concepts come out of the level of the mental and the mind and off the pages and see nooks and crannies you would not see. Because one of the reasons I love her book is she is one of the rare authors that delves into sex and sexuality in such a conscious way in terms of mindfulness. She often talks about mindfulness practices that you can do, how oftentimes mindfulness practices are even more powerful than some of the other practices, and how to do them. And so she really gives a lot of credence and credit to that concept of, being with the sensations and the thoughts and the sensory system of the body, which is what mindfulness does. So I really love that. And the other thing I really love in this book that she does is she goes into some really big and fundamentally deep incongruence in our society about what we have been taught and think about sex and sexuality versus how it actually works. Breath of fresh air there. I first came across that word incongruence in Cassie Urbaniak's book Unbound. She calls it NonConcordance in this book. And the biggest one she talks about is arousal non-concordance. So did you know, well, you will know if you read the book, there are two different types of arousal that occurs in the body. And one can happen without the other happening. And in only one range can you give consent in. And in men, half the time they're in concordance with each other. And in women, only 10% of the time are they in concordance. So there's a lot of non-concordance happening in women in this range. And well, I can guess as to what conditioning did that. But anyway, another story for another day. So basically you have arousal coming from two different places, like the old school limbic primal parts of the brain that will literally cause the physical structures of the body, the genitals, to react to any kind of something in the air that could potentially be sexual. It's like, oh, alert, something's happening, could be sexual. So our body would be reacting as if we seemed aroused or excited, or like erections or engorgement or just biological responses that happen during sex, which we equate to arousal. And then there's this other kind of, at the mental level, at the contextual level, what's going on in this context. As I take in information at the intellectual level, the only level that I can give my enthusiastic informed consent in, am I really actually, is this matching up with this, right? And so in men, most of the time that happens, and it's just, if this is on, this is on. And women, not so much. And she brought to the forefront in her book two amazing examples of why the hell we should care about that. And one was with women, kind of 50 Shades of Grey example, but a reality example of one of her clients who was with somebody and they stimulated her genitals and then kind of left the room to let her simmer, and then came back and she was like, okay, I'm kind of bored, this is really not doing it for me. And they were like, exactly in the 50 Shades of Grey book, oh, well, that's not what your genitals are saying to you. So we're taught as women, and that was a horrific way that we were taught to bypass our own gut intuition, context, mental level of, am I turned on or not? To just be like, bypass right past that. And we just assume from how our body biologically reacts, which could be just because there's something sexual happening. I remember in another book, I think it was Sex at Dawn, there was a study where genitals reacted as if they were turned on at all sorts of random shit that doesn't turn them on. So what is this message teaching women, teaching young girls about consent and sexuality in the world? And on the flip side, what is it teaching men? And she gave an example. I'll give you a disclaimer. I'm going to talk about a date rape situation that she mentioned. One of her clients had at a party stumbled across another guy date raping a woman, and genitals got aroused. He's used to concordance. This was non-concordance, freaked him out, and completely shamed himself, even though his head was going, this is fucked up, just like got the guy and left, instead of going, oh, there is non-concordance happening, and what is happening here is not okay, and how do I properly handle that to protect her, to get her to safety, so fundamental concept to learn, to sit with and to be with and to think about in how you've personally experienced that. Because once I started to realize that, I was like, oh, I've actually personally experienced that before. And now it's like she puts these pieces of puzzle in place with this book. They're phenomenal. And the other one that she did, which you kind of blink and miss it, is another big inconcordance, which we know in society, right, is the kind of patriarchal religious indoctrination about sex and how some things are low and dirty and less than, and some things are higher and more pure, that's like logic. And certain kinds of sex are pure and higher and revered, and men and bodies and animals and instincts and women and sex or urges are lower on the moral foundation scale. And how much we don't, at the mental level, you would say out loud, I don't really agree with that. That's kind of a ridiculous old concept. And yet I feel it in the guts and the roots of my body, because we were all in the West conditioned with that in some way, shape, or form. So we've all been conditioned around that, and it's a way that there is a non-concordance with what we really believe, but what we've absorbed and how we really react, even though we don't think at the mental level that we believe that. So that was another one that was just like a side note, you'll blink and miss it, that I thought was powerful. The other one that she mentioned had to do with stress and stressors and what did she call it? The gas and brakes system, which is what I went through in this workbook. I went through her little gas and brakes system. What are your gas? How does your gas operate, and how does your brake system operate? And it's different for every individual, and you very well likely have a different gas and brakes operating system than your partner. And so learning that just unpacks so much mysticism and inconcordance there, right? So that you can both get on the same page. And she describes this as your gas is like, we decide, oh, I want to get intimate. I want to go throw down. I'm excited or whatever. Like, I want to do this. So you get the babysitter for the kids and you set the time aside, or you go out on a date or whatever. And then you get there and you're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. Or the brakes are on from all of the stresses. And we just automatically think, oh, it's going to be throw down and it's going to be instantaneous and let's go, right? But that's really not how it works. It's like we're driving the car trying to hit the gas, and some of us are more sensitive on the gas, easier gas, or the gas is a slow rev up while we're pulling up the brakes at the same time. my body's not good enough. I feel insecure. I'm busy. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I'm whatever puts the brakes on for you. So we get to that point where like finally like, okay, I'm gonna be able to hit the gas and this is gonna be great. And we're like, oh wait, there's this, like, we're trying to, there's an emergency brake or a brake that like, an urgent brake? I wonder what we could call that. Anyway, I'm gonna let the brakes off. And for some people, brakes are really sensitive to come on. And for some people, the brakes stay on and they're hard to take off. So it's like learning what your brake system is and what your gas system is, right? Which is the last thing I want to talk about. Is she was talking about the concepts of sex drive. When you're talking about drive, completely wipe that from your mind. There is no such thing as a sex drive. We have a drive to eat, a biological bag drive to get nutrients, a biological bag drive to get water. We have a water drive, right? We will die without water. We will die without food. And one great point she brought up was how much naughtiness and just horrific behavior in men have we just written off, because it's like, oh, boys will be boys and they have a sex drive, right? So it's like, just like a big excuse to shitty behavior. I mean, in general. But let's just set that aside and look at it in terms of, we value, she points out, one kind of drive. It's like instantaneously, I can turn it on anytime and it's like 0 to 90 in 2 seconds, right? If your sex drive, even though we're gonna get rid of that term for lack of a better term right here, we'll use it, is like a slow, simmering, long, time intensive, delicious, juicy, like marinating, kind of like that's what your jam is, then in society where it's friction-based, fast-paced, from Sex and the City, jackrabbit sex kind of intimate interactions that are quick and fast and very friction-based, so you're not subtle, then we're narrowing ourselves and we're labeling, and people take on that shame or labeling because they're like not in that range. That range isn't really necessarily better than that range, right? So if we're there and that's the gold standard, we're not going to explore all of our ranges of intimacy and connection and sexuality, and we're just not going to explore it because, that's not the norm. That's outside the norm. I thought that was a really powerful point that she brought up. So many like gems in this book. I give this book all of the stars I can give it, like all of the stars. It was a great read and very helpful. The workbook is practical. It was really fun to be able to go through that gas and brakes with my partner, and it really helped shed some light on my own self. It's like, here's the operating system to your gas and brakes and to your partners, and then how do you like play together with that? So super cool. Highly recommend, highly recommend. Come as you are, Emily Nagaski. Have a fabulous day.